Welcome to Speak Your Mind. I'm Louisa Turanga. It's good to be back with you. Well, the Fiji Electricity Authority has successfully been corporatized and is now Energy Fiji Limited, EFL, the government's newest limited liability company. Now, they're putting us, the Fijian people, at the very center of Fiji's energy sector by offering us non-voting shares in EFL to domestic electricity customers, which is us. So I know some of us are still a bit unsure about this. So with us this afternoon, we have EFL CEO, Mr. Hasmukh Patel, and also Ms. Annabelle Ndudhia with us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay. So just jumping straight into it, what was the reason for the move to list EFL?
Well, as part of the diversification of the Fiji Electricity Authority,
Right.
to corporatize it. And the idea was, as part of the corporatization or divestment exercise, the government decided it fit that the domestic electricity customers of FEA should take part in the corporatized EFA. And in that, shall I say, I meant was that we should be offering them shares to the domestic electricity holders, some 5%, and that also for nil consideration. That means they do not have to pay anything for that, but they'll get free shares, the domestic electricity customers of EFL.
When you did the change from FEA to EFL, was there an organizational change, like a restructure?
Well, not really, because that's only the first part of the whole process, corporatization.
Okay.
So corporatization basically means that from a government, a commercial statutory authority, it has now become a public company which is limited by shares. And the idea of offering non-voting shares to the domestic electricity account holders of EFL, some 5%, the 95% still will be retained by the government in the initial stages. Of course, in due course of time, the idea is to also dispose of some 44% of the shares to a strategic investor or strategic investors. But the government will still retain 51% of EFL over a period of time.
Okay, I'll come back to that and the strategic investors. But yesterday, because you were coming on the show today, I thought to just walk around and ask a few people on what they thought about this. And I did a quick walk through town, and some of them, well, most of them didn't quite understand it. So if you can just explain, please tell me why I should fill out the application form and become a shareholder. What does it mean for me, the domestic customer?
Well, basically, you're becoming a shareholder of EFL. You'll be given a parcel of shares.
Right.
Now, there are two categories of domestic customers. The first category is what we call subsidized electricity customer.
Okay.
Now, what does that mean? That means that when you receive your monthly bill, part of your bill is subsidized by the government.
Right.
Okay. Now, how do you qualify for subsidy in terms of your electricity bill? Is if your combined annual family income is $30,000 or less, then you could qualify to become a subsidized electricity customer. The whole idea is that the government wishes to subsidize the low-income earners. And in Fiji, it has been decided by the government that anything below $30,000 combined family income, they will be eligible to become a subsidized electricity customer. So the decision that has been made that the subsidized electricity domestic customers can apply for shares, and if they qualify, then they'll be given a parcel of 250 shares.
250 shares.
Okay. And the electricity domestic customers who are not subsidized, that means the combined family income is more than 30,000, right? And they have to pay entirely for their bill. There's no government subsidy. They will be offered a parcel of 150 shares because their family income is more than 30,000 and they do not come under the category of low income earners. Okay? So basically there are two sets of shares, one to subsidized domestic electricity customers of 250 shares, and the other parcel of 150 shares is to those electricity domestic customers who are non-subsidized.
Yeah, okay. So just correct me if I'm wrong. Say the price per share is $5, and as a domestic customer, I'll be given 250 shares. So I will own 1,250 of Energy Fiji Limited.
No,
Yeah?
that means your share value is that much.
That's my share value.
That's
but
your
I'll
share
receive
value.
dividends on that.
Yes, so that's your share value, because normally when an entity, for example, is corporatized and it's limited by shares, then in your structure you'll say, okay, these many shares will exist. For example, for EFL, the total number of shares has been decided as 500 million shares. Okay? Now, if you take 5% of 500 million, then that's 25 million shares. So out of the 500 million shares, 25 million shares will be distributed to the domestic electricity account holders of EFL. Okay. Now, as at April 16th, 2018, there were potentially 127,000 customers who could qualify for receiving those shares. What we are asking those 127,000 odd customers is to fill in the application forms and come to our temporary customer care centers, which have been opened throughout the country. And when they come along with their application forms, the requirements are very simple. The requirements are that you need to be a Fiji citizen. So if you want to prove your Fiji citizenship, either you have your passport, and in the event that you do not have a passport, then you can bring your voter registration card. That proves that you are a Fiji citizen. You need to be also resident in Fiji, right? And be an electricity account holder. That means the account should be in your name. So if the account is in your name, you have a voter registration card, that means you're a Fiji citizen and you're resident in Fiji, then you qualify for one parcel of shares. Now, FEA already has your identification as a subsidized customer or a non-subsidized as of 16th of April 2018. That's the time we determine that 127,000 potential customers are there who can qualify for shares. But then if all the 127,000 came forward and they qualified and they received the shares, we still will be holding some shares for future domestic customers. So in due course of time, when they become a new customer, because the government is spending a lot of money in extending the grid to ensure that rural customers who do not have electricity presently do get electricity in due course of time. So if you become a customer, electricity domestic customer in due course of time, then some shares will be held by the trustee for the future customers of EFL, domestic customers.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. You're on Speak Your Mind. We're going to go for a quick break, and then we'll be back with EFL. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind. With us, EFL CEO, Energy Fiji Limited CEO, Mr. Hasmukh Patel and Ms. Annabelle Nduvia. We're talking about the non-voting shares that has been offered by government as part of their commitment to this, putting Fijian people at the very center of Fiji's energy sector. So we were talking about the criteria earlier, and I just have a question. You know, if you're renting, and because one of the requirements, you have to have an account. But if you're renting, you're paying the bill, but the account is in the name of your landlord. Do you have provisions for like tenants, or because I'd like to get shares, but unfortunately, I don't have an account.
Good question. You see, the electricity domestic customers, shares will be offered to them if the account is in their name. Okay. So as I said earlier, on April 16th, we did a cutoff, and whoever held electricity domestic account holders, they will get the shares. So if the account holder is the landlord, you could be the tenant and you could be paying the electricity bill. But if the account is in the name of the landlord, right, as at 16th of April 2018, then he will obviously apply for the shares, right, as the account holder. And if EFL, if he qualifies, will be issuing shares to him, then you might say, what happens to the tenant who is actually paying the electricity bill? It's unfortunate that the account holder is the landlord. But supposingly, if you moved out of that particular house and you went somewhere else, right? And the new place you went to and you opened an account in your name, then you could then apply for the shares.
So these are the provision.
The provision for the future. Because let me stress at this point that this whole process initially is closing on the 29th of May at 4 p.m. So whatever applications we get by the 29th of May, 4 p.m., obviously, as we are receiving the applications, we are verifying them. So soon after the 29th of May, so within the next couple of 2-3 days, we will know who all have qualified for the shares and have met the criteria. But then if you have not been able to get shares because you were a tenant, you are paying the electricity bill, but because the account holder was the landlord, obviously he's going to come for his shares and he will get it because he complies, under the criteria. But should you leave that premises and go to another premises and then open an account in your name, right? Now, supposingly if you are renting into a new place, then obviously if you want to open an account in your name, you will need to seek the approval of the landlord.
Right.
That, the landlord will certify that, yes, you are a tenant in his premises or her premises. Okay. But that's fine. Once the landlord gives you the permission that, yes, he or she is renting in my premises, then, you can open an account in your name. And you could apply for future shares because, as I said earlier, certain amount of shares will be held in trust for future domestic electricity customers.
Right. Okay. So just going back to shares and the dividends you receive, how will it be given? In cash, like to me, or will it be credited to my electricity bill?
Well, obviously, when you talk about dividends, then the company has to make money first, right? And there has to be a dividend policy.
Right.
So going into the future, as I said earlier, we want the final structure to look like this, that 51% will be still government controlled or government owned.
Yeah.
44% could go to a strategic investor or investors, but that is still down the line in the next year or two. And 5% is the electricity domestic customers of EFL. So if the company does well and the company directors have a dividend policy and they declare a dividend, then whoever is a shareholder, depending on the amount of dividend and as per his shareholding, he or she will receive a dividend. Now your question was, how does one receive the dividend? Well, there are two ways of receiving it. We could credit that amount, dividend, to your electricity account, or should you prefer to have that money in cash? And that is one of the reasons why in the application form, we have asked people for their bank account details. The reason we want that bank account details is in future as we go forward, and if EFL declares a dividend and as a shareholder, you receive a dividend and you opt to have it in cash, then we can always deposit it into your bank account.
Bank account. Okay, you said sometime down the line. Now, the whole process will take quite a while, the divestment process. So when will you offer the first lot of shares, and when do you expect to make the first payout? Like all of this whole process?
Well, basically what I'm saying is the application for shares, the first lot, is closing on the 29th of May at 4 p.m.
Right.
And thereafter we'll take a few days to see, we are doing it continuously as we are receiving application forms. But soon after, 2 or 3 days after the 29th of May, we'll have the whole list of people or domestic customers who have qualified for the shares. And then there will be share certificates issued to them. Okay? And once they receive the share certificates, then obviously they have officially now become a shareholder of EFL. And as far as dividends are concerned, ultimately the objective is to stock list the company on South Pacific Stock Exchange. The model that I'm talking about, 51, 44 and 5%, then obviously then it will be listed on the South Pacific Stock Exchange. And that could happen, there's some sort of a deadline which we have already put there around March 2020. Now it could happen earlier than March 2020, okay? But the latest government envisages that this whole, divestment process, as I have explained to you, will be completed by then, and we should be stock listed by then.
March 2020. Only until then can we buy and sell shares?
No, only up until then you can only acquire the shares free.
Free.
Remember the domestic customers. They don't have to buy it, they don't have to sell it. They get it free if they fill in the application form and they qualify. But once it becomes stock listed on the South Pacific Stock Exchange, then the trading will start.
Okay.
That means should you wish to buy more shares, should you wish to sell your shares, you'll be able to do that.
Okay. Can you just explain to me, I keep hearing the term non-voting shares. What does that mean?
Non-voting shares means that you will not be having any voting rights.
Right.
Okay. So basically what happens is, obviously it's a limited liability public company.
Yeah.
and it has shareholders. Now, there will be directors appointed by the shareholders. Now, in this case, the major shareholders will be 51%, ultimately government. Right now, it will be 95% and 5%. But once we get the strategic investors, then there could be 2 or 3 shareholders, major. So the domestic customers who hold the 5%, they will not have any voting rights or any input into the appointment of the directors. You know, they can attend annual general meetings, but they won't be given any reports, etc. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I understand.
Yeah. But they have a shareholding, but no voting rights as far as director appointments and any other major decisions of the company.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Patel. We'll be back in a bit. You're on Speak Your Mind. We're speaking with CEO for EFL, Energy Fiji Limited, Mr. Hasmukh Patel, and also with Ms. Annabelle Ndudia. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind. I'm Louisa Turanga. With us today, this afternoon, Mr. Hasmukh Patel, CEO, Energy Fiji Limited, and Ms. Annabelle Ndudia. We're talking about applications. The closing date is on the 29th of this month at 4 p.m. How many applications have you received so far? Good.
Yes. Very honestly, you know, the turnout has not been what we expected. We have received, you know, just over 10,000 applications. But we see there are potential 127,000 domestic electricity holders who could apply for the shares, and if they qualify, they will receive the shares once again free of charge. Mm-hmm. So we are humbly appealing to all the domestic electricity account holders to come forward. Time is running out. You know, today is already the 15th of May. You've got precisely 2 weeks to go. So basically we appealing to all our domestic customers who have accounts with EFL to come forward. We have these temporary customer care centers which have been opened throughout Fiji. If you want to obtain information where there is a temporary customer care center opened very near to your residence, then you could do it in a number of ways. You could ring a toll-free number 1333 and you will be advised which is the nearest temporary customer care center near to your residence. We are also advertising it on a regular basis in the Fiji Sun. It is also on the EFL Facebook page. It's also on the government Facebook page. The opening times of these various temporary customer care centers that have been opened by EFL to accommodate these applicants who come in with the application forms for acquisition of these non-voting shares. All right. So what we are saying is you've got 2 weeks left, and there's still practically thousands of people who haven't come forward, and we want them to come forward. Of course, you can also download the application form from the EFL web page, and you could fill it up online and send it to us. You could also email it to us at efl.com.fj. Okay? So what we are saying is we telling the customers, electricity domestic customers, to please take advantage of this situation where the government is issuing free shares to domestic customers of EFL and acquire these shares. In due course of time, these shares could appreciate in value. You could even sell them and get something in return. Right. And the government is offering them free of charge today. Okay. So please come forward and acquire them.
Okay. It's you know, quite easy. Yeah? You get shares for free and you get money back. Is there a catch?
No, there is no catch. Okay. It's very straightforward. You know, the government is considering that the citizens of Fiji should have a stake in the energy sector. And as part of corporatization, they've decided that we will offer 5% of shares to the domestic customers. Now remember, these domestic customers are ratepayers of EFL, right? They use the electricity and they pay their accounts. And that's the reason the government has decided that we will include them as part of the energy sector development. And the shares are being offered free of charge. And there's no catch at all. In fact, in future, you will benefit if it appreciates, or once the company is stock listed, should you wish to sell your shares, you could sell and receive some funds for it.
Okay. You know, one of the reasons companies are listed on the stock exchange is because of the reduced tax. Eh? How will this trickle down to customers? like domestic customers?
No, for example, if you're a domestic customer of EFL and you acquire shares, in terms of taxation you're talking about, right? So basically, if you have a job, for example, you're working somewhere and you have a salary. So basically, if your salary is less than $30,000, then obviously there is no tax, right? Because the tax limit is over 30,000. That means you're only required to pay tax if your income is more than 30,000. So if your regular job gives you a certain amount of income, and if the dividends that you receive still does not go beyond 30,000, then there's no tax. So all your income through your normal job, through your dividends, if it still adds up to less than 30,000, then you do not have to pay any tax.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Patel. I read somewhere that EFL has a mission to become 90% renewable by 2025. That's like 7 years' time. So have you received any potential strategic investors who are interested in that the percentage share you're talking about?
Yes, that process is underway.
Okay.
And the government had called for expressions of interests from parties, both local and overseas, who wish to acquire that 44% stake in EFL. And that process is underway, and it's going to take some time to decide. Obviously, you want to get the best value, right, for the sale of 44% stake in EFL. So that's going to take some time. And obviously, the idea is not to only sell it to a party who's going to give the highest amount of money for it, but we also want a party who can add value to the company in terms of development of skills, further capital investment, and things like that. So there's a number of criteria which will decide which is the right strategic investor to sell that share to. And that process is underway.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Patel. You're on Speak Your Mind. We're going to be back in a bit. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind. With us this afternoon, Mr. Hasbuk Patel and Ms. Annabelle Ndudia of the Energy Fiji Limited. And we're talking about becoming a shareholder of EFL. You and I can both do that. All we need to do is to fill out the application form. Now, Mr. Patel, why now? Why is government doing this now?
Well, it's not now. The Fiji Electricity Authority was declared a reorganized, or shall I say, an enterprise to be reorganized a few years ago. And the process has been going for a number of years now. Okay. And we have come to a point now where most of it has been sort of done, and it was ready to be corporatized, right? And that's exactly what has happened. So it's not that it has been done now all of a sudden or something. The process has been going on for at least 2 to 2.5 years. And we have come to a point now where it is ready to be corporatized. And that's the reason it happened, and that's the reason why it happened now. Because we have come to that point in time.
Okay. Just for future customers of FEA, will it still be free by the time it comes around for them to apply for this?
Yes. As I said earlier, that after we close on the 29th of May, and whatever shares are allocated to qualifying domestic account holders, then some shares will be retained in trust by a trustee. And then thereafter, any future customers of EFL, domestic account holders, they will be eligible to apply for the shares through the trustee, and the trustee will then ensure that they've met the criteria, and should they meet the criteria, then they will be offered the shares for free as well.
Okay. Cash power customers, those that buy the card, can they also apply for this?
Yeah. When we talk about domestic electricity customers, you can be either prepay or postpay. That doesn't really matter. Okay? And to be very honest, the prepay customers are those customers who reside in rural areas, right? The reason we have put them as prepay customers is because they stay far out from the urban areas. To administer their bills, meter reading and disconnection is very costly. That's why we have put prepay meters out there, so that they can buy the cards and use the electricity as they want. So there is no question of disconnection and reconnection and all that. So therefore, we believe that most of those prepay customers would qualify in that 30,000 and less. That means most of them could be even subsidy customers,
Right.
and therefore they could qualify for the 250 shares instead of the 150 for non-subsidized. But answering your question, yes, the free shares are for both the post-pay customers as well as the prepay customers.
Okay.
As long as you're a domestic account holder, you can apply, and if you qualify, you'll be given the shares
Okay.
free of charge.
Okay. Just help me understand this. I know you mentioned it earlier, but I really need to understand this. 5% is the shares. The 95%, will it go on the stock exchange or?
Initially, as I said, that the government, as I speak right now, owns 100%.
Right.
Now, out of that 100%, 5% will be given to the domestic electricity account holders, and government will retain the 95. That's stage one. Then stage two, that 95, government will retain 51, and 44 will be given to a strategic investor or investors. Okay? And that's the final model. Okay? And that could happen within the next year to 2 years, right?
Okay.
So the final structure of the company will be 51% government ownership, 44% strategic investor or investors, and 5% is the domestic electricity account holders of Energy Fiji Limited.
Okay.
Okay.
Any local investors showed interest?
There have been some local strategic investor who has expressed interest in the acquisition of the entity, you know, the 44% as we said. But the whole process is going on right now. The bidders, you know, who have put in their EOIs, it's been evaluated. There have been discussions going on. They're also looking a bit more into EFL and its operations in depth. Okay. And as I said, while this is going on, it may take, a year or two, but definitely before March 2020.
Okay. Okay. Any other benefits apart from just receiving dividends or becoming a shareholder?
Well, as I said earlier, that should you not decide to sell off your shares, then over a period of time, we expect the share value to appreciate. Okay, so that's a benefit. Sometimes the shares could be valued at a particular price today, but if the company does extremely well, then obviously the share value of the company will appreciate.
Right.
And therefore, if you're holding certain shares in the company, then the total value of those shares will increase as well, should the share value appreciate. And that is likely to happen.
Okay. Charlie asked the question, he had sent it through. If he has to die, if he passes away, what happens to his shares?
Good question. That is the reason, we talk about a will, isn't
Right.
it? That everyone should have a will, especially if you have got a good amount of assets, then you should have a will. In case you passed away, then there is a will in place that clearly outlines that all your assets, who will it be given to?
Okay, so that's all covered.
So
there.
basically, the shares is also part of your assets, and that should be covered under your will, that should you pass away tomorrow, then whoever has been appointed by you as the recipient of your assets, right? Whoever in your will has been nominated to acquire your assets will automatically get your shares as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Patel. You're on Speak Your Mind. We're going to be back in a bit. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind. With us this afternoon, CEO for EFL, Energy Fiji Limited, Mr. Hasmukh Patel, and Ms. Annabelle Nduthia. Now, we're talking about the non-voting shares, that we can become shareholders of EFL. Now, just a question, when we do become shareholders, we'll receive dividends. So is there any capacity building training or financial literacy for your customers, just on shares and all that? Because to be quite honest, not a lot of us, units and shares and all these things, investment is quite new.
Yes. Once we go through the process, the first stage, and we issue shares and share certificates to people, domestic customers who have qualified, we envisage to set up a small unit within EFL who will actually disseminate information to our domestic customers who wish to know more about it, what's happening on a day-to-day basis, or should they have any questions, we'll have a small division within EFL who will take care of disseminating information to the shareholders regarding shares and things like that.
Okay.
All right, so there will be a unit within EFL who will take this on going forward.
Okay. Where are your teams right now, the temporary customer care?
Throughout Fiji.
Yeah, they already started, huh?
Yeah, we started basically around the last week of April.
Okay.
And as I speak right now, we've got only 2 weeks left. As I said earlier, closing on the 29th of May. So we are appealing to all those domestic account holders who have not yet come forth. Please come forth. You can send your completed application forms with the required information via email to EFL. The details are there on our webpage, on our Facebook, where to send, how to send. Or you could even come to the temporary customer care center, which is near your resident. The information regarding the temporary customer care centers is in the Fiji Sun. It's on the Facebook page of EFL, on the government Facebook page. So please come in with your application forms and lodge in your application forms, and you will then, we process the application forms, and then the shares will be issued to you. So please take advantage of this free offer and come forth, as we have only 2 weeks remaining before the offer closes.
Okay. Since we're wrapping up, it's the last segment. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to for our domestic customers, especially?
No, I think it's a great opportunity for domestic customers of EFL to obtain a stake in the energy sector. And I think all the domestic customers should take full advantage of this offer by the government and EFL. And I remember there was another entity in Fiji who had offered free shares some years ago, and people still have shares in that particular company, and they get regular dividends at least twice a year. So then you really see the benefit once you start receiving dividends. Or in future, once the company becomes stock listed on the South Pacific Stock Exchange, and if you have shares, then you could do a number of things. You could either, should you require money, then you can always sell your shares. If you do not need to sell your shares, then the value could appreciate and your shares could be worth more. And should you be paid a dividend, if the company does well and you get a dividend, with that dividend you could buy even more shares.
Right, you can
Because once the company is stock listed, on South Pacific Stock Exchange, then the trading will start on a daily basis.
Okay. Just doing a recap, the criteria, if you can just explain that again.
Yeah, the criteria is very straightforward. You need to have an account with EFL, domestic account.
Right.
That means the account should be in your name. And if it's in your name, then you fill in the application form. And you need to be a Fiji citizen. And the proof of your Fiji citizenship is very simple. Either you have a passport. In case you don't have a passport, then you have your voter registration, which proves you're a Fiji citizen. And you should be resident in Fiji. So those are basically the simple 3 requirements. And if you comply with all the 3 requirements, fill in your application form, show evidence of your qualification, and once your application is processed, then we will issue sales certificates to you sometimes in June.
Okay, and how soon are you going to list on the SPSC?
Well, as I said earlier, that once we sell the strategic portion of FEA to the strategic investor, then it's most likely that then it will be listed on the South Pacific Stock Exchange.
Like in the next 2 years?
Within the next, I would say, 2 years. It could be earlier.
Okay. And it's not just international investors you're looking at, local as well?
Well, investors are investors, right? We need to get the right investor, of course, with the right skills that add value to the company, as well as, offer us a good price for that 44% stake.
Okay, so just reminding you that it's free. You don't have to pay for these shares as a domestic customer, so they're open to domestic customers. And that's it. Speak your mind. I'm Louisa Turanga. It's been nice having you here today. Thank you for explaining things a bit more and helping me, a domestic customer, understand. And I hope you did learn more about everything that was discussed today. Thank you so much, Mr. Patel and Ms. Ndudia. It was good having you today on the show.
Thank you, Lisa.